Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are back with another Jurassic World figure to take a look at. This time we have the final of the Mimo Toys figures I just recently acquired. There is only one other figure to my knowledge that is out and available, which would be the Velociraptor Blue. I haven't quite decided if I want to pick that one up yet. I think it's kind of an ugly figure, but the fact that, I would have all of them except for one kind of bothers me. But who knows, maybe I'll get to it at some point. However, this time we have the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus, and this one may be their best figure overall. It's really hard to tell at this point, but I think it definitely has potential to be the nicest looking one as a whole. You can see the packaging looks just as it did before, with the window area, the Jurassic World logo, and then of course the species name and everything down there at the bottom. And if you turn it to the side, pretty much follows the same trend that it usually does with the Jurassic logo and stuff on the side. And then there's a nice shot here on the back of the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus itself, looking absolutely incredible. And this image here on the back of the box will definitely be very nice reference material for me the next time I decide to repaint a Jurassic World Dominion style Giganotosaurus. But it also kind of shows where they have that kind of greenish tint on some versions of it, including this version here, where you can kind of see a little hint of like a greenish tone to it, which is pretty surprising. But regardless, I'm actually very excited for this, so let's pop it out of the box and check it out. Okay, so I was definitely wrong. It is not their best figure. I would say at this point the best one was probably the Indominus, but this one looks cool. It just doesn't perfectly capture the Giganotosaurus. And one thing that, straight away I have an issue with is something that is very common, it seems, when it comes to these Mimo figures, and that is the tail looks very awkward. It's very short and does not at all look like the tail of the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus. It's super strange looking. But, outside of that, they've captured some areas pretty nicely. Like, I think the head sculpt looks pretty good, and the overall way the snout looks is actually quite reminiscent to the Giganotosaurus. They haven't quite captured the look of the ridges moving along the back of the neck, and, some other areas, like the skin texture is just, I think, a little bit too large and stuff, but a lot of the other areas look better and closer than the tail does. Regardless, I'm pretty excited to take a closer look at this, so let's jump to it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt, I feel like they really did do a pretty good job on the head sculpt. Like when it comes to the way that it looks specifically here in the snout, I think they've captured the likeness of the Giganotosaurus really well. Like the shape and everything looks very good. The sculpt and detail looks pretty decent as far as how vibrant it looks, how good it looks on the sculpt. Again, maybe a little bit larger as far as the scaling goes compared to the way it should look, but they've even captured like that small eye that the Dominion Giganotosaurus has, which is definitely a huge plus for the figure. You can see we have a green, a pretty dark green for the primary body color. Then you've got a black that patterns down, kind of similar to the Giganotosaurus as well. The mouth is sculpted in an open position, just like with the Indominus. You can see we've got like some pinkish tones here on the side of the mouth, but then when you look inside the mouth, although there is some okay detail in there, there's no paintwork on the upper side, and you basically only have paintwork for the tongue. The tongue is fairly nicely textured, which is a plus, but no paintwork past that point on the inside of the mouth. The teeth are painted with kind of like a light yellowish tone, which is definitely better than the greenish tone that we had for the Indominus, but they are a little bit sloppy as far as the paintwork goes, which you can see. But again, I really wish these figures had an articulated jaw. As you can see, that is not the case. It would be really cool to have the articulated jaw on these. As you can see, the upper part of the head also looks pretty decent as far as the sculpt and detail goes. As you lean back, you again pick up that black that basically overtakes the back almost entirely and then stripes down into the side of the body. You can see that area where you would have larger ridges for the Giganotosaurus. We do have them, but they're just not that big. Like, they aren't as standout as they should be. But as you lead down, you can see a good bit of variation to the sizes and style of the scales, which is nice. You can see a few skin wrinkles as well, and again the patterning moving down. We do have articulation in the neck, which can swivel just like the Indominus Rex had going on. Moving down into the body, again, the scale detail looks pretty decent on it. Again, not perfect as far as the way it looks, replicating the Giganotosaurus from Dominion, but it's very vibrant and looks good on the sculpt. So you can also see, again, a good bit of variation to the sizes of the scales. And as you move closer down to the underside, the entire style of skin texture changes. You've got a very different style even here compared to the way you see it on the underside with much larger scales. But as you move down into the arm, you can see a little muscle definition in the arm. Again, some decent looking detailing. This is like a rubber in this area, so it's sort of flexible. We also have articulation in the arm, which again is just basically swivel articulation forward and back. You've got some scoots moving down the fingers right here, and the nails are sculpted out. Okay, very obviously not meant to look sharp because again it's a toy for kids, but it looks okay for what it is, but unfortunately no nail paint. As you move up into the back of the Giganotosaurus, very similar to the way the Indominus looked, you kind of have muted detail up here on the back, and that's something that was like a primary complaint as far as I'm concerned when it comes to the Indominus. But you see the same thing here moving along the back of the Giga. You do have that almost like hump in the back of the Giganotosaurus though on this version, which is a plus. But again, it really, first of all, I think it should be a little bit bigger, but it really needed them up here on the back of the neck as well. And they're just not as impressive as they should be. But as you move back along, you can continue to see, again, we have that patterning moving down into the body. But you can see it very abruptly disappears. Like right here, it looks like it should run down into the thigh a little bit. And unfortunately, it does not. But as you move down into the thigh, first of all, you again have articulation, just swivel leg articulation where it can move forward and back, and that's really about it. It's very smooth but also a little loose, so just like the Indominus, the figure seems to kind of fall when you try to stand it in a more natural position. But as you lead down, the scale detail and everything looks pretty nice in the thigh. You can see the muscle definition and everything moving down. You can kind of make out the knee and again a calf muscle. And then we lead down into the foot sculpt, and the foot sculpt looks okay. You've got some nice scoots moving down the toes. The foot sculpt almost looks, I would say, identical to the way the Indominus foot sculpt looks. So maybe not perfect to the Dominion Giganotosaurus. Looks a little more Indominus-like to me, if you ask me, but that's just my opinion. As you can see, the nails are painted on the feet, though, which is nice. And even the dew claw is painted, so one up on Mattel, at least. And then you move out into the tail, and this is where things definitely go awry for the figure in a big way, because the tail looks so weird. It looks like they basically took the tail of the Giganotosaurus and just kind of like accordioned it up and just kind of crushed it. So now it looks super, super strange, very armored moving along the back of the tail, but about as awkward as it honestly gets. You can see we have more of that black running out, but it ends about halfway down the tail, unfortunately, and the tail is also way too short to be the tail of the Giganotosaurus. You do have more scale detail here moving along the underside of the tail, which does look pretty impressive and pretty nice, but the detail is a bit muted up here on the top. And then again, you have that skin texture here moving along the underside that almost looks crocodilian in some areas, and then transitions to kind of larger scales as you move up. You can also see that the Mimo figures again are super, super skinny now compared to the way they used to be. And then we've got the sculpt here of the head on the other side. Again, a little bit different as far as the way the patterning and stuff looks here in the face. Not perfect to the Dominion Giganotosaurus, but it looks fairly reminiscent as you move down. One thing to take note of is the fact that the Giganotosaurus looks like maybe it has a very ever so slight turn toward the dinosaur's left in the head, but it might just be the way that the neck is actually applied, because it doesn't look like it's applied perfectly. I don't know, it's too hard to tell. But as you move down the arm and everything looks pretty much the same. The skin detail and everything here in the stomach looks pretty much the same over here. The only big difference would be the fact that the leg is supposed to be kind of trailing on this side compared to leading on the other side. And you can see the skin texture and everything looks pretty much the same as it did on the other side over here, except for, again, the foot is sort of picking up off of the ground as the dinosaur is taking a step and walking along. And you do also have swivel articulation again in the tail, just like you have basically with every other area of the figure. And again, that's super, super short tail. So some areas looks pretty decent and other areas not so much. Now, as far as a size goes, for a height, you are looking at right around 17 inches or about 43.5 centimeters in the more upright position it's in currently. But of course, that could change depending on the way you position it. As far as a length, we're going to have to lower this. And lengthwise, you were looking at right around 29 inches or about 74 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our Giganotosaurus from Mimo Toys. And just like with the Indominus, it's pretty much the same size. I don't feel like we really need many comparisons because it's just such an awkwardly sized figure. Like, it's really cool that it's huge, but it's not quite colossal size, and it's not quite like, mainline Mattel size. It's somewhere in between. So you can very clearly see that it still towers over all of these figures here, but isn't quite, the largest Dominion-style Giga we've had. And for one more comparison, because as I said, numerous comparisons just aren't going to work too well for this figure, but one comparison I did want to do would be the Hammond Collection version of the Giganotosaurus next to the Mimo Toys version, which the Hammond Collection version, I believe, is the largest Giganotosaurus we have that isn't the Super Colossal version. And as you can see, again, the Mimo Toys version is a whole lot bigger than our Hammond Collection version of the Giganotosaurus is. So this Mimo Toys Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus is kind of fun. It's, pretty much as fun as it gets when it comes to a Mimo Toys release. These figures are never what I would consider perfect representations of the dinosaurs they are meant to represent, more like stylized versions of the Jurassic World dinosaurs, and you can definitely see that here again with the Giga, but I feel like just like with the Indominus, they're definitely getting closer. They honestly nailed the head sculpt, in my opinion. I think that looks spot on to the Giganotosaurus, but they've also messed up some areas like the ridges in the back of the neck, the size of the ridges on the back of the body where we have that almost like hump-like area, the size and length of the legs as well as the tail is just a complete disaster. But other areas again look okay. The paintwork is pretty much as we usually see for the Giganotosaurus, where it has like a greenish tone, even though the actual Dominion Giganotosaurus appears to have more of a gray with kind of like a slight greenish tint to it, but it still looks pretty good. We also have again that patterning moving down, and it moves pretty far out into the tail, about halfway, so it is nice to see that coloration lead out into the tail, but it of course would have been nice to see the paint the entire way out through the tail. Painted nails on the hands would have also been nice. The articulation works fairly decently for what it is. It's fairly basic, kind of generic articulation. An articulated jaw would have been a huge plus for this figure, but I've said that with each and every Mimo Toys release, I think, and so far they haven't altered them at all. And I'm really curious if Mimo even still has the license for the Jurassic World line, because there was a Carnotaurus they had teased that somehow still has not been released. I don't know if it's canceled or what, but I would really like to see that get a release at some point. But overall, it's still pretty cool because it is the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus. It is an official toy, and it's absolutely huge. So even though it has some negatives, it definitely has some positives as well. If you are interested in grabbing this and adding it to your collection, though, it's a pretty hard one to find, and that's why the Brazilian shop that I ordered this from is an absolutely awesome place to get this, because otherwise you're going to pay $1 bajillion trying to get one in your collection, but they offer it for about as reasonable of a price as you're going to find, I think, for this size figure coming all the way from Brazil. So if you are interested, make sure you check the links that I will include in the description so you can head on over there and grab this Giganotosaurus and add it to your collection while you still can. And of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.